Hello and welcome to More Than a Game, a podcast about the A-Leagues, Premier League and more. My name's Tommie C, and this week on More Than a Game, if a team wins the Club World Championship and no one watches, are they still world champions? The A-League's February Festival of Football, and chat, and the cum dog gets a shag and wagon. As I said, my name's Tommie C, and joining me this week is Jesse, just the two of us. Jesse, how you doing this week?
Mate, good. Thought you were about to break out into song there. Just the two of us. Great song.
It just occurred to me that it was Valentine's Day. Two days ago? So this is a special Valentine's Day edition. Just the two of us, you know.
I'm glad we didn't miss that joke. I'm glad we caught it. No, good, mate. Good. It's good to be back after a couple of weeks off.
Very good, very good. All right, mate. Let's hook into moment of the week. What do you got this week?
Well, the thing is, since haven't been on for a while, there's been a fair bit of football, and I believe a couple of my moments, which were sandwiched in the same game, was from last Thursday. So there has been a bit of football since, but it was the Mariners McBalls game with a couple of absolute wonder goals. The noon outside of his left foot, absolutely sensational, and also Tommy Orr, the forgotten man, with an absolute banger as well.
Who's playing as like a 6 now as well. Like, when did this happen?
Yeah. And he also looked like he was a little bit sort of bewildered himself. He's like the kind of like, you fire about 50 balls in training and, you're lucky if you even hit one, and he just pulls it off in one shot. So pretty impressed with that. The other one is, future Alex Tobin winner, Matt Leckie coming good. It's also on the agenda as a moment of the week. I mean, I needed to get that in there because so far this season he's he's just like Southampton. He's made me look like an ass. So it's good to see he's actually finally doing a little bit of quality.
He's doing quite well at the moment, much to my embarrassment as well.
How about yourself?
So for me this week, I got a couple as well. First of all, really rated that Adelaide are going to be debuting a Pride game in the next couple of weeks on the back of Josh Cavallo coming out earlier in the year. Adelaide are going to be playing a Pride game against Central Coast on the 26th of February. And to me, this is something that the NFL in particular, and to a lesser degree the AFL, do really well, where like they do have particular weeks or rounds that are devoted to things that are important to the league. So in everyone knows that America, like the military, is very, very important. And so like they have like military week, and each of the teams has like some camouflage built into their kit, right? And in this week, for example, Adelaide are going to be having rainbow numbers, which again is just like a really simple thing, but it shows what's important to the club. It shows what's important to each of the players in the team, and I guess it helps to show that the club and the league have values, and that will either attract people, or some people may not like it, but ultimately that's up to them. But it's important, I guess, that clubs have values, I think. So I really enjoyed that. Look, on a lighter note, I mentioned at the top about the cum dog getting a shag and wagon. This is something that I only just saw just before the pod. Vince Rigari posted a photo of the cum dog in a VW combi, and a few people were like, "Oh wow, that's amazing!" Like the number plate said "swaggin'," which I thought was good too. But then naturally there were a few different responses to like what the name of it should be. There's obviously Swaggin', which is the number plate, but then you've got like there's the cum van or the cummobile, or I thought the best one was the Cumby van, which is just almost too obvious, wasn't it, in the end?
Love it.
Oh dear. But all right, mate, what have you got in terms of own goals this week?
Well, again, it just seems like a bit of a blur for me. I wasn't on when a lot of the Zoomer stuff kicked off, so that was certainly pretty low. And
well, we actually haven't had a pod since then, so we were planning on talking about it this week. So, sorry, mate, keep going.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the Zoomer stuff was pretty grim, and I mean, obviously that followed, what had happened with Greenwood, which again is, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I feel like that's in another stratosphere as far as terrible stuff. But the Zoomer, wow, the response on social media has been insane. Like, it's just first of all, it's probably some of the most appalling but dumb footage I think I've ever seen. You know, I think it was his brother that filmed the whole thing. It was just ridiculous. And the response, though, I mean, like, then you've just got people coming out and saying, well, you know, you hate Kurt Zuma, but you're happy to have a bacon sandwich. And it's just like someone's just set a match to Twitter and people have just piled on and just lost it. And then you've just got to this point where it's just mutated so many times within conversations that what are we even talking about? I mean, Antonio's been interviewed and obviously he's put his 10 cents in about racism, which, you know, of course has got its own flaws and problems that we all know about in the game. But it just, wow, like just one video, which was appalling, has just completely set fire to all these other issues. And it was sort of like a lightning rod. So, yeah, I think it's just the kind of the awkwardness of wading into the conversation from any angle. If you waded in at the start, it was awkward. If you waded in halfway, it's awkward. It's just one of those really bizarre turn of events, which I think we'd all prefer if he just didn't kick the cat in the first place.
Yeah, mate. It's like you say, there was a bunch of different, like, weird and just unfortunate angles to this whole unfortunate, ugly incident. Really, like, obviously you had the club's response or lack of a response, the fact that they still selected Zuma to play. I think it was 24, 48 hours after the incident first surfaced on social media.
Moises' comments and
saying that like he looks after the football side, the club looks after sort of anything off the pitch related. And like then there was a club sponsor that walked away, Vitality. I'm assuming it's the same Vitality company that used to sponsor, I think, Bournemouth's home ground. And what else? Like you said, Kurt Zuma's brother, who plays for Dagenham Red, he was stood down, and sort of what looked like the best way to have dealt with that situation was that Zuma was stood down as well. But I mean, West Ham squad is just so light on at the moment that, and it was quite obvious that Zuma's potential replacement Diop just isn't trusted by Moyes. So it was a bit ugly that Moyes kind of felt like he had to play him because of the options available to him in his squad. And it was against Watford, the game, so he probably could have still taken a chance and played Diop and still got the result that he was after. But yeah, just a really disappointing, first of all, that it even happened in the first place, but then just the way that it's snowballed and just gotten out of control ever since.
It's what we call an own goal vacuum. I mean, it vacuums up all the own goals for the week because it's that big.
Exactly. Did you have anything else that you wanted to mention as well outside of Kurt Zuma universe?
I don't think anything can really rival that.
I'm going to try. I mentioned at the top about the Club World Championship, which I didn't know was even on until after the final had been played. And I think I only realised it was played not because Chelsea fans were happy that they'd won, but because Corinthians fans in Brazil were posting continually that Palmeiras don't have a world championship, don't have a Mundial. So yeah, I thought that was kind of funny, but just bizarre that the whole tournament just gets so little oxygen, I guess, in the football world. Also, someone else made a good point online during the week that FIFA have promised a female version of the Club World Championship for a couple of years, and it's a genuinely a tournament that would actually be interesting because football is not as concentrated in the women's game as it is in the men's game in Europe, and bringing together the champions of say of Asia or even an Australian or a W League team, having an NWSL team, a Women's Super League team, or the Champions League team from Europe, and so on, and that would have been genuinely interesting. Whereas the Club World Championship, it's a glorified couple of friendlies before the South American team plays the European team, so it's just a bit dull. I'm not surprised no one really knew it was on.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention was about the South Melbourne and their approach to, I guess, milking every ounce of of noise out of the Ange at Celtic connection at the moment. And this week, they released they put on social media a South Melbourne their goalkeeper kit for the season. They chose green in honor of Ange at Celtic. Which I thought, like, there's, apart from the fact that it's green, there's nothing else to indicate that it's related to Celtic. So just, I mean, they are trying so damn hard. And look, to their credit, there was a whole bunch of people that were on Twitter commenting underneath it saying that they would buy it, and they were from Scotland. So look, maybe they're onto something.
The target market's not even Australia at all. It's just Scottish fans.
And they were going to add an option for shipping to Scotland on their website. So
of course they were.
Mate, just wild. Look, a few news pieces and listener questions as well before we get into the A-League, though. First of all, and this was one that I had picked out before we get on to Shannon's question about transfers. Connor Chapman has signed for Brisbane Roar, I think late last week. A signing that I think went under the radar. I thought he was very good at City when he was very young. I think he was only 20, 21 when he left for Korea. Then he played for two different clubs in Korea, then came back to the Woo, didn't play much, so went back to Korea, and then has come back to the A-League via Seoul in the J-League. So he's a player that I think is real quality. I think he's a player that probably could do with a trip back to the A-League again, just to play regular minutes, because in Korea and Japan over the across two stints with four clubs, he hasn't played a hell of a lot of games in either of those two leagues. So coming back to the A-League, and look, Brisbane need quality as well. So I think that's a great signing all round for those. Look, but Shannon, he asks us to rate the following January A-League transfers, or I think January/February A-League transfers out of 10. First of all, Jesse, we've got Scott Wooten to Wellington, ex-Man United Academy, EFL2 to Wellington. He's a 30-year-old English defender, played at a bunch of different clubs in the Championship, League One, League Two. He's also got the same birthday as me.
Well,
and mate, he even scored tonight. He got Wellington's opener on debut. So what rating would you give that out of 10?
Oh, I mean, you've got to give him 11, don't you? A pretty good start.
There is nothing better than getting a goal on debut, especially if you're a defender as well.
And a clean sheet. sheet. So I think you've got to say, like, it's been a blistering start, but I mean, we probably do need to temper our expectations. But I'd say at this stage it's probably an 8, wouldn't you?
Give him an 8. He's kind of, I guess, I've forgotten his name now. The English defender that used to play for Newcastle, his name escapes me.
Stephen Taylor.
Stephen Taylor. He's kind of Stephen Taylor's replacement as sort of the experienced defender at the Knicks, isn't he? Like that's I think is the aim, right?
Yes, I hope he can bring the same level of shithousery, though. That's I'm not sure that can be fulfilled.
Maybe they should put the number 10 on him like they did with William Gallas, and maybe he'll be a goal scoring centre back for them.
Alioski for Leeds.
Moving on, you had Zach Clough has signed with Adelaide. He's another player that sort of bounced around League One, League Two in England. Signed for Adelaide. He's only 26, so by no means is he finished at sort of the highest level, but played or came off the bench last night for Adelaide against City, and looked pretty handy. I've got to say, didn't stand out by any means, but definitely looked like a quality player that I'm sure we're bound to see more of in the next couple of weeks for Adelaide. He hasn't played heaps in the last few years. I don't think he's played more than 15 times in a season, played more than 15 times for a particular club, and some clubs he's been at for multiple years. So you can understand why he's maybe decided on a bit of a change of scenery by coming to the A-League. I guess we'll still have to see what happens with him. A player like him, he's obviously got plenty to prove at 26, though. So I think that looks like a handy signing for Adelaide. I'm going to give that one 7.5 out of 10, because maybe just still a little bit too early to tell.
Mm.
And finally, you got Luciano Narsing signing for Sydney. He's a 31-year-old Dutch winger, born a day after me and Scott Wooten.
It's our reference point for all signings.
Well, it's funny because like when I was checking out Scott Wooten on Wikipedia, I just stumbled upon the fact that he and I were born on the same day, and then when I googled Luciano Narsing next, like 5 minutes later, I realized, hang on, his birthday's the day after.
I think Wooten went to the wrong club by the sound of things.
Exactly right. But look, he played 150 games for Feyenoord and PSV in Netherlands. Also played a season for Swansea in the Premier League. So he comes with, and I think he's got at least 15 caps for the Netherlands as well. So he comes with a pretty decent pedigree. Obviously, at 31, not necessarily sure about what his fitness is like, and I guess also what his motivation is like coming down under. But look, could be a fantastic signing for Sydney, and they look like they've kind of turned the corner a little bit in the last few weeks after a bit of a rough start to the season. So, look, Jesse, you want to go out on a limb and let us know what you think out of 10 for Luciano Narsing as a rating?
I'm going to just play the straight bat and say 7 out of 10 at this stage.
Fair enough.
More to come.
Look, yeah, I think that's fair because he does come with a good pedigree, but we've seen plenty of players with a good pedigree come to the A-League and not necessarily set the world on fire. Finally, our final listener question in this segment is a simple cactus asks, should the A-League have a pre-season tournament to generate interest, such as a futsal or beach football tournament? And I had a couple of ideas as well, like previously there used to be an All-Stars versus A-League Champions game. I know there's been it's been thrown out the idea of a Community Shield between the FFA Cup / Australia Cup champions and the A-League champions. What do you think? Should we just do all of those things next season, pre-season, or what?
Yeah, I mean, my idea would be, well, it's not really my idea by any means. It's an idea. It's an idea that's been trialed amongst other codes. Would be less so about the pre-season games. I think you could still do some cool stuff with maybe a feature game. So I wouldn't rule it out. But I think the thing that the A-League probably needs to catch up with is a round that's all the games are at the same place, because it's catching fire across the different codes. NRL called theirs Magic Round, and they have it in Brisbane from, I think it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think they even extended it to Thursday last year. So you buy a pass just like you pass to a festival, and all the teams are there, and you spend the weekend in Brisbane and you watch all the games. And so I noticed that the Super Rugby are doing a super weekend this year. It's going to be in Melbourne. This one's going
everything is super with them, isn't it?
This one's going to be in Melbourne. So this is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I think that's in April. So they're great ideas for people to all congregate in one city, do some sightseeing, but also go to the games. And it is like a festival pass. You can, once you've paid for your ticket, you can go and watch multiple games. And with the A-League, I mean, I guess we all kind of envisioned that probably the place you'd do it would be maybe at Bankwest Stadium in Parramatta or something. And you just have all the games in one place for the weekend. And I think it would be great for the A-League. I think a lot of people would travel to just go there for that one weekend. So I'm not sure if this has been mooted before, but I think it's definitely something that if they want to keep up with what's happening across the other codes, they're probably going to have to consider something like this.
I think that's a good shout, because not only that, but it's a way for the APL, the organizer of the A-League, for them to increase their engagement with the state and the state governments, because like something like this, it could bring like 100,000 tourists to a place. And if you're offering to bring 100,000 people for a weekend, or maybe not 100,000, maybe 50,000 people to say Brisbane or to Sydney or to Melbourne, any city around Australia for a weekend of maybe four extra matches, like that's a big boost to the local economy, right? And so
connects people too, because we follow people and see people on Twitter and various forums that people talk amongst the different fans groups. There's a bit of banter. Well, a lot of people haven't met before because they've just sort of seen each other's profiles online. But I mean, if you all congregate in one place, you're more likely to make that trip to Brisbane next time. You're more likely to maybe think, oh, can I go to Perth for a weekend next year? So it's sort of, and then you meet up with those people again. So it's kind of like it connects people in the different fans groups, and that's probably got to be a good thing for attendance.
It would be a real festival of football. And,
absolutely, that's what it should be. Festival round. There you go.
Well, instead of having a whole round of a festival of football, the A-League at the moment is having a whole month of festival of football. The A-League is serving up basically football 6 nights a week at the moment, with still the regular 3 games on a Saturday as well. Tickets are capped at $20. Jesse, I want to know, like, what do you think of this current promotion that the A-League is doing?
Absolute cafeteria of football at the moment, isn't it? You just put your tray out every night and there's a meal.
I tell you what, it is a battle though. Like, it was at 2:00 yesterday. We were originally planning on recording the pod yesterday, listeners, and I messaged Jesse at about 2:00 to say, hey mate, I didn't realize City were playing tonight. Do you mind if we postpone to tomorrow?
Yeah.
Massive stitch up, but look, it's a little bit tough to keep to know when your team is playing or that there is a game on, for example. So I guess there are 2 sides to this whole just smorgasbord of football at the moment.
Yeah.
Look, with all of the cancellations and postponements, not cancellations. Sorry, Jesse. With all of the postponements over the Christmas New Year period due to COVID, the state border closures and the like, it has meant that it's one reason that's led to this whole February Festival of Football. But it has meant that the A-League ladder is a bit of it's almost useless to look at the ladder at the moment, because you've got you've got some teams that have played 13 games, and then you've got some teams that have played 8. So normally I would look at the table as a bit of a reference point to go, how's this team going? But a lot of listeners would be familiar possibly with other sports where they do something like sort of like a power rankings. And although we're not going to do sort of like a 1 to 12 power rankings at the moment, Jesse, I wanted to talk about sort of maybe a couple of teams that you think are actually impressing you at the moment, or who you think are in good form, and then we'll slide through as well into teams that are on the slide and who aren't in good form at the moment, despite maybe having played more or less games than the other teams around them. So, mate, who do you like at the moment? Which teams are impressing you?
I reckon for me, Newcastle's been really impressing me. There's been not just the games that they've won. I think it was the Victory game recently that comes to mind, but the games where they've been down the goal and they've fought back. I mean, it almost feels like Thurgate. Listeners, if you didn't know who that was,
everyone knows who Thurgate is, surely.
Thurgate, he's one of our own. He really carries that team. He's a real leader in that team, and he's pulled them out of the fire a few times. And I think that resilience is great to see. I think that's really encouraging coming into this time of year. And I didn't really give Newcastle much of a chance. I mean, I was away when the whole Newcastle loaner stuff kicked off at the Phoenix's expense, unfortunately.
Rip.
But I'm impressed with how they're going, and I guess. I mean, I have to say the Knicks, not because I necessarily decided I wanted to, but because at the moment I feel like they're in a good run. And we really, when your team particularly is on a good run, you really notice it, because you're sort of like, if you're used to being on the wrong end of results, then when you're actually getting some decent results, you notice it. And I think at the moment we're in a pretty good, the Knicks are in a pretty good moment.
I think they're 2 very, very good shouts. I'm a big fan of watching Newcastle at the moment, because they're so good with the ball, and I guess the challenge for them is trying to stop the goals though, and make them a little bit tougher to beat, because they have been when all of the stars align and they finish their chances and they're a little bit resolute at the back. Everything looks great, but if things aren't quite going right for them, they can have a little bit of a tendency to be a bit leaky at the back. So if they're able to sort that out over the next month, then who knows what we could be looking at with the Jets for the second half of the season. For me, the other team that I wanted to mention, Sydney, I think they've sort of turned things around a little bit in the last couple of games. Got 2 wins, 2 draws in their last 4 games, so undefeated. But look, the other one I really want to mention is Adelaide, because I thought they were pretty much buried last night against City, and the fact that they were able to come back into the game and just stay in the game when the opposition is doing very well, I thought was showed a lot of heart and a lot of concentration. And they, although some of their goals last night, particularly against City, not necessarily pure quality, but they still managed to get the win and held out a City side who, at least in the first half, looked like they could have been a little bit rampant. So Adelaide looking very good at the moment.
Yep.
In terms of teams that are on the slide, though, who's not looking good at the moment for you?
I think you'd be remiss to not mention Perth. I don't think Perth are looking great, and they're a puzzling one for me, because I see some of the names in that team, and there's a lot of those players are still there, but the results aren't coming. And I mean, we didn't mention Brisbane and the positive side. I mean, Brisbane's been a little bit more up and down, but Brisbane's got these young players who just, to quote a classic M-tagism, they just seem to want it more. And you look at Perth in the table, and I know that, everyone's got a different amount of games played, but the table doesn't really lie in that regard. Like, Perth don't look like a team that you really, any week, you're expecting them to win. And that's bizarre, considering that they've always been in the finals conversation for as long as I can remember. So it just seems like a bit of a bizarre situation with Perth at the moment.
Perth strike me as a team at the moment, as a team that you want to be playing, like, because they just they don't look like everything's clicking at the moment. So, and obviously it's been really tough for them this season with the borders closing, the WA borders closing, and them being stuck in the hotel room in Brisbane for a while, and so it has been a really tough season. But I guess this is when a team has the opportunity to show what it's made of as well, and I guess they haven't necessarily shown that they're made of great stuff. For me, the obvious one I thought was MacArthur. After they haven't won a game in the past 5 games, there've been a couple of draws in there though, and they're a team that looked quite good at the beginning of the season. They're playing the whole sort of pet midfield of Tommie as a 6. Davila and De Silva as free 8s, and I mean that's just wild. I mean, they're scoring plenty of goals, but they're just a leaky ship at the moment. So
if you abbreviate that 3-man midfield, it spells odd, and I think that really sums it up. It is odd.
I feel like it has the potential to be something great, but yeah, it's basically just odd at this point. All right. Look, plenty of A-League games for us to get through. We're gonna slam through these pretty quickly. Western Sydney are playing Melbourne Victory right now, so we'll tune into that and give regular score updates and reactions as throughout the pod. But Jesse, your Wellington, they hosted Brisbane Roar earlier this evening. Great win for the Knicks. Clayton Lewis, he hit the post from a nice free kick outside of the box early on before Scott Wooten scored with a header from a corner to make it 1-0. Henry Hall, hit the post before Sandoval then hit the back of the net just a few minutes later to break Raw hearts, which made it 2-0. And then just 5 minutes later, Sotirio tore down the Phoenix right-hand side before cutting back to Piscopo to complete the route and make it 3-0. Did you think 3-0 flattered the Knicks, or was harsh on the Raw at all?
I think a little bit. I think personally, what pleases me about it though is that, I mean, how many times have I come on the pod and talked about the Phoenix having, been the Brighton of the A-League and having a lot of chances or a lot of ball and not really doing much with it, or never looking like they're really going to score. I'm not fazed if we are going to have games where we don't necessarily completely dominate, but then we're clinical. That's encouraging. It means that they're whatever Tele is working on when it comes to the end product, the players are clearly responding. So that's the kind of thing, I think an example in the league of like a team that's always been very good at this is City. I mean, like City they don't always play well, but they've got a ruthless attack in front of goal. And I think that's what Phoenix, if they want to strive to beat those kind of teams and be up in the league with those sort of teams, then they have to play like them and be more clinical. So I'm pleased to see the Phoenix starting to be more clinical.
They say it all around the world that the key to winning championships is being able to win ugly. And look, the Knicks, they didn't necessarily win ugly today, but they definitely were very clinical with their chances. Just 2 points from this game that I wanted to mention. The commentators were absolutely having a mare in this one, I thought. They pretty much ad nauseum were reminding us that if Wellington had have won this game, they'd be one win from being top after being bottom at some point in the last week, or second bottom in the last week. And they also just kept saying about how Scott Wooten played for Man United, but I'm pretty sure he never played a league game for Man United, and it just felt really cringe that okay, this guy, he came through the Man United academy, great, but he never played for them. Moving on, though, Melbourne City, they hosted Adelaide last night. Really strange game. I thought there were 3 disallowed goals, and Adelaide were a little bit lucky with some of the goals. Obviously, there was the winner with Mo Toure scored with just a bit of a loose back pass from Carl Jenkinson. That was the winner, and then obviously you had Harvey Lopez's cross come shot as well, that just you got a little bit lucky with that early on.
This is a classic cross come shot, wasn't it?
It was if you had to have the dictionary and like a video of what a cross come shot looks like, it would be that, because
that's right.
There's absolutely no way he meant that. But look, they all count. City actually looked very good in the first half. They looked like they were back to their best, but I think it would be very, very frustrating the fact that they weren't able to convert some of their chances, and that they obviously had a couple of chances ruled out for offside as well.
You were at this one, Tommie.
I was, yeah.
What was the mood? What was the mood in the crowd amongst the people around you during the game?
Look, to be perfectly honest, there weren't many people around me. I reckon there would have been lucky to have been probably 2,000 people at the stadium, maybe 3,000. But look,
maybe the rest forgot that City was playing as well.
It wouldn't shock me, to be honest. Or maybe they were trying to get their digital memberships to work, because City rolled out digital membership, so it's basically like a token in your digital wallet, and you just scan that at the gate. But apparently that didn't work. So
boomer-proof memberships.
Yeah. But look, considering the size of the crowd, I thought it was a decent atmosphere. But it was a Tuesday night, and I mean, I think as I think it was Damo and Cole we mentioned recently, like we do a football podcast and we're struggling to know when our team's playing. So I think the general public can probably be forgiven for not necessarily knowing that the games are on at the moment.
Yeah.
I normally follow like the Apple iCalendar in my phone, and it hadn't updated that there was a City game yesterday. So anyway,
even their fault.
Central Coast, they hosted Perth on Sunday afternoon. The Cumdog got another goal, struck again, but it was Dan Steins who broke Mariners' hearts late on in injury time as the Glory and Central Coast shared the points. In Dan Sturridge watch, he wasn't in the squad, so there was no Sturridge at the Coast. Dan Sturridge and the Cumdog combining, that's a combination that I don't think anyone ever saw coming. Brisbane, they hosted MacArthur on Sunday as well, and the Raw actually put in a pretty solid performance here after a couple of performances that haven't quite hit the spot recently. Goals from Mile Usnich, Corey Brown, and the best name in the A-League, Henry Hall, gave Brisbane the win. MacArthur looked like they might have gotten back into the game, though, through Mariappa, and he made it 2-1 at one point. But alas, Brisbane killed off the game to make it 3-1 not long after that. So a little bit disappointing for MacArthur. That looks like their season's sort of coming off the rails a little bit. Wellington hosted Adelaide on Saturday night. The Knicks looked on course for another determined win over a top six side after Jael Sandoval gave the Knicks the advantage after about 20 minutes. A tighter finish after David Ball played him into acres of space. but alas, it wasn't to be, and Adelaide got a very, very late equaliser to break Nick's fans'
I
hearts.
think we can blame Damo in the group chat for that one. He was already talking about the amount of points that Knicks would be on, and they conceded in the last minute. So
Damo. It's like this like the equivalent of the commentator's curse, but it was Damo in the group chat.
Exactly.
Mate, a question for you, and I thought David Ball was outstanding in this game. He was everywhere. He's just a machine that just runs and runs and runs. But he puts in so much work. But he was quality in this game as well, I thought. And I wanted to ask, at the Knicks, is he underrated, or is it just across sort of generally in the league that he's underrated?
I think across the league, I don't think at the Knicks he's underrated, but you see a lot of the Kiwi press talk about how underrated he is, and I think they're referring to the rest of the league. Yep. He's got to be the Knicks Firmino. If you're in a bar with somebody and you're having a big debate about, it doesn't score enough goals, and then you go, no, but it's what he does off the ball. You're having exactly the same conversation with David Ball.
No, that is a good shout.
Yeah,
that is a good shout.
The Knicks Firmino.
Melbourne Victory, they hosted Newcastle on Saturday as well. The second half of Melbourne's double for Newcastle. A couple of things I thought that were interesting or noteworthy from this game. I did enjoy Brendan Hamill's half-hearted bicycle kick to score. He ended up being offside, but it made me giggle nonetheless anyway, because if there's a player that I can't imagine doing a bicycle kick, it's Brendan Hamill. Josh Brillante obviously was sent off for a red card and for 2 yellows, I should say. And that really did change the game. I thought Victory couldn't really get out of their own half in the second half once Brillante got sent off, and he's such a key part to them going forward and also defensively as well. Arguably, you could probably make a case that both of the yellow cards were a little bit soft. The first one in particular, I thought was a bit soft, but that second one, he pretty much rugby tackles the Garte to the ground, and it just seems like a silly tackle or silly play to make when you're already on a yellow card. Or probably the worst thing to come out of this game, I've got to say, though, was to do with Keep Up or the A-League's highlights or mini-match package that they released for this. So according to the mini-match, and I should say the highlights package, Hoffman's equaliser, they show that, and that gets chalked off by VAR. But then it just cuts to the second. Then it just cuts to another highlight, and they don't actually show the Jets' second goal. So I'm yet to see the Jets' second goal in this game, the goal that actually wins it, which is pretty annoying. I did see I think it's it must be the first goal that they don't show, not the second goal, because I've seen the second goal, which is Hamill, where he fouls Bumal. Bumal gets kind of sort of hipped out of the way, and then Mikkel Tadzi ends up scoring from the spot to give the Jets the win. It
was Yule's goal, which was the one you're probably referring to, and that was pretty impressive finish. That one.
Haven't seen it. Would love to see it. Just so Keep Up or the A-League just want us to be able to see that. Would really appreciate it if they can actually put the goals in the highlights packages. That would be really appreciated. Also on Saturday, Sydney hosted Western United. Absolutely appalling conditions at Cogra. It was absolutely bucketing down. La Nina really hitting home in this game. The Woo with some desperate defending, unhealthy dose of luck in the first half. But look, it was Steve Lustica who opened the scoring for the Woo. And then Burgess, he was able to get a tidy goal for Sydney to equalise. Sydney continued their middling season, while the Woo are currently wildly on top of the table.
Yeah, you have to pinch yourself a little bit about that, because we just talked through the form picks and the slide picks, and the Woo wasn't mentioned in either. So I guess in a way it makes sense, because maybe they're just steadily picking up the points as they go, and they're not sort of going too hot, too cold.
Yeah, look, probably the funniest thing about the Woo is that they have. Hang on, I've got the table in front of me. They've scored the third least goals, but they have the the second best goals against as well. And obviously this is a little bit tricky because, like I said, different teams have played a different number of games, but they've played the second most games. They've played 11 games, with Adelaide having played the most on 13. So the fact that they have a very good defense. We've spoken on the pod recently about how they are struggling a little bit to score goals, but when they do score goals, they are a very good chance to win. It's just making sure they find the back of the net somehow. So on Friday night, Western Sydney, they hosted Melbourne City. This was the game where Matt Leckie ended up getting a double for City at Parramatta, making us all look like fools. Jesse, do you want to stand by your prediction regarding Leckie getting or being Golden Boot?
I never doubted him. Never doubted him for 1 minute. Yeah.
I think on the topic of Golden Boot, you've got Jamie McLaren. He's on 8 goals at the moment. Mikkel Tadse's on 7. Goodwin's on 5. Mile Jovinic on 5. Naboo's on 4. And then there's a whole bunch of players on 4 as well. So Leckie not quite in the top 5 players, goal scorers, but still plenty of time for Leckie to catch up.
I can't remember who I put as the Golden Boot. I think I had Leckie as the player of the season, but I don't know if I had him as my Golden Boot. Pretty sure I put McLaren. I can't remember though. We might just have to check the tapes.
Of course, look, regular listeners will know that we do a check the tapes at the end of the season in the season review pod, where we talk about all of the terrible predictions that we make at the beginning of the season, then revisit the worst ones.
And there's plenty.
Plenty. There are plenty. Jamie McLaren also missed a penalty in this game. It's not often that we see that. And Western Sydney did open an account in this game. They scored once after the ball was absolutely blasted at a City defender from about half a metre away, and a penalty was given. Really strange one that was even given as a penalty, got to say. And also the other thing I wanted to mention from this game was regarding I think it was Phil Moss in commentary kept calling Florent Berenguer, which I appreciated. I hope that catches on.
Like it.
Yeah. Central Coast, they hosted MacArthur on Thursday night. This was the game that Jesse, you mentioned earlier on in the pod. A couple of really cracking goals from Tommy Orr and Craig Noon, while the Mariners had penalties for Bozanic and Morash. Really strange one that 2 different players to the Mariners scored from the penalty spot. But look, that's just the way some teams roll. But look, I thought that was actually a really entertaining game between 2 of the most underrated and arguably the two of the smaller sides in the A-League. But really, really fun game, that one. Ended up finishing 3-3. And last but not least, we had Wellington, Jesse's team, hosting Melbourne Victory last week. This was the game that was played behind closed doors after the Knicks were unable to find a commercial partner to assist with costs in hiring Wynn Stadium in Wollongong. And Jesse, I wanted to ask you, especially as a Knicks fan, and look, we don't know all the specifics regarding like the financial situation of the Knicks at the moment. We don't know how much it costs to hire Wynn Stadium, but what are your thoughts? Were you disappointed that they've had to do this? I mean, there's a little bit of a cult following of the Knicks in Wollongong in particular, isn't there?
Yeah, it is unfortunate. I'm surprised in a way. I mean, we talked about the crowd attendance on Tuesday, but I'm surprised this isn't happening a little bit more across the league. I know that we get some decent attendances on the weekends, but there's a lot of midweek games, and I'm wondering how some of these clubs are affording to broadcast these games. So, I mean, yeah, I guess at the moment you could say it's a Knicks problem because of what we've seen, but I'm interested to see if all the other teams are that much more flush with cash at the moment when it comes to broadcasting. Be interesting to know. It's a Damo question.
Yeah, I know, right? He always manages to get the details and this kind of thing. But look, in this game, it was a really predictable cup hangover from the VUC. But look, Wellington still had to beat the team in front of them, and the Knicks put in a determined, steely performance to beat the newly crowned FFA Cup champions 1-0. Look, that is a wrap up of what I think about 2 rounds worth of A-League football. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit of Premier League. There just happened to be 2 rounds of Premier League as well. So look, we're going to hammer through some of these. Some of them we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. Some of them we'll just sort of skim over. West Ham, they played Watford last week. The game was, I've got to say, was dull as fuck. West Ham ended up winning 1-0. This was the game that was just after the Kurt Zouma incident first flared up. And look, we've probably talked about that already. Interestingly enough, Kurt Zouma he pulled out of the following game against Leicester with a late injury. So it'll be interesting to see if he actually plays in the next one, or if that's sort of the club's way of sort of sneakily just keeping him out of the spotlight for a week or two. Newcastle helped themselves to 3 points at home to Frank Lampard's Everton. There was a pair of own goals in this one, which I was almost tempted to make my moment of the week. Jamal Lascelles, he bundled it over the line, over his own goal line, before Mason Holgate basically did the same thing about 5 minutes later. Which one did you like better, Jesse?
I thought they were both great, but I mean, I think what you're referring to is that they both assisted each other, right? So it's like, I think it's sort of unprecedented for 2 players to not only score own goals, but just to assist each other in the same game. Yeah, incredible.
It's got shades of a little bit of match fixing there, doesn't it? Bit suspicious.
Yeah.
Kieran Trippier, he scored from a free kick just outside of the box. A really great effort from him.
World Cup, Kieran.
We said that Kieran Trippier would bring this to Newcastle, and he has so far. He's already scored 2 free kicks. Adds an extra arrow to Eddie Howe's bow. I've got to say, maybe old T-Rex Arms could have done better with this one, with Jordan Pickford maybe not quite getting as close to it as he maybe could have. Burnley hosted Man United, which ended up finishing 1-1. Jesse, how absolutely predictable was it that Man United weren't going to win this game?
Yeah, well, we'll talk about them again later, but they have a habit of going up 1-0 and somehow conceding a goal, and that's exactly what happened. But it was a class goal from Burnley, which their new signing, Weghorst. Might have to get a Mayo check on that one, because I might be a little bit off. But
is Weghorst like? It sounds like it's like a German sausage, doesn't it? I think is he German or is he Belgian?
Isn't he Dutch? I mean, I could be well off here.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's Dutch, I mean, of course it's Weghorst. So I mean, like, can we get we need to get our Dutch correspondent Louis on at some stage to see if I've got that right. But look, all aboard the Weghorst.
Oh, I love that. And look, I did really rate Weghorst's involvement in the setup for Jay Rodriguez's goal. I thought that was class. And I guess if Burnley are going to be a better footballing team going forward, then it can only be goodness for them as they try to get out of the relegation zone. No woman nor cry. The Bob Marley derby as Norwich hosted Crystal Palace. In this game, this ended up finishing 1-1, but we saw 2 sides of this. The Wilfred Zaha coin scored an absolute peach of a goal from cutting in off of the left, and then absolutely smacking it home from that sort of 45-degree angle to the far post with his right foot. Great goal, and then ended up missing a penalty. So, yeah, just no.
Well, I mean, it's not just the fact that he missed the penalty, but in the manner he missed it. I mean, it's like he decided to change his mind at the last minute, and it just trickled towards Foster. Well, not even towards him. He missed the goal as well. So
yeah, by some way.
By some way.
Norwich at one point were leading though, and it looked like they could have taken all 3 points away from this game, which had they actually have taken 3 points away from this game, it actually would have made them level on points with Everton. That was at the time. I'm not sure if that's the case now after Everton's win later on in the round, but still the fact that Norwich are still like in with a hunt and probably at this point look the most likely of the 3 teams in the relegation zone to actually escape is Dean Smith is doing an incredible job. Manchester City, they hosted Brentford. Murray's scored from the penalty spot, and KDB scored an absolute beast of a goal as well. Got to say, probably the worst thing about this game was I think this was played on Thursday morning last week, and it was at the same time as the absolute goal fest at Villa Park, Spurs and Norwich. As Norwich looked like they were going to be pushing Palace all the way. So really disappointing that this was the goal rush game, because it was so boring. Brentford just couldn't even lay a glove on City.
Yeah.
Spurs hosted Southampton, and it looked like at one point Spurs were up 2-1. Looked like they were cruising, but then ended up scoring 2 goals in the final 10 minutes to lose this game. I've got to say, Antonio Conte must just be absolutely pulling his hair out, especially to be in such a comfortable position against a team that, according to you, Jesse, have just been absolutely circling the drain for the last couple of years. So, and look, Ralph Hasenhüttl, he looked very pumped at the end of this game, very satisfied with the result.
We can only conclude that Southampton are avid listeners of More Than a Game. and when some upstart from down under said, mate, you guys are going down this year, Ralph said, listen, let's show that guy on More Than a Game that we're going to stay up this year and we're going to do it in style.
Yeah, and they're doing really well at the moment. Like, obviously, you got James Ward-Prowse just like scoring free kicks for fun, but like they have been good against teams that look like they've underestimated them.
Yeah, and I think, more to come on their forward. I don't know if it's Breuer or Brozier.
Brozier. Yeah,
Brozier's been fantastic for them, and Chelsea will, Chelsea, all of a sudden Chelsea got a couple of players like Gallagher and Brozier on loan that they're going to have to think about whether or not they want them back next season because they're playing that well.
Well, there was talk even in January of even West Ham or maybe a likes of Everton going for a player like Brozier, but I think they had a bid of something in the region of about £25 million rejected. So they're going to be charging. Chelsea are going to be charging top dollar for a player like Brozier, I think, if they decide to not hold on to him. Aston Villa, they hosted Leeds, a goal and 2 assists for Coutinho here. Gives him 2 goals and 2 assists in 3 games. Jesse, do you think Coutinho could be this season's Jesse Lingard in propelling a mid-table side up the table and possibly into European spots?
I was listening to a podcast about this the other day. I think it was a BBC one where they were talking about how, because of this gap between Villa winning, I think it was at Everton, and then resuming their next fixture, there was a gap of a couple of weeks. Remember, there was the international break and things in the middle. And it's flattered. It's sort of flattered to deceive with Villa. We all think that they've got this good feeling. They've got new signings. Stevie's doing a decent job, but they've actually haven't had the hottest streak. They've had a few draws. They've lost, I think, once or twice, and they have had a win in there against Everton, but they're not on a great run, Villa, and they are all of a sudden at the beginning, they were showing real defensive resilience straight away before they started getting their attack going. And now they're starting to concede goals. And there was this inevitability in that game, even when they were up like 3-1, that they were going to panic and let them the goals. And they look like a team that doesn't quite know how to hold on to a lead yet. And Mings doing Mings things where he just, 1 minute does something great and the next minute does something really amateur. And yeah, it's just, they look like a team that's still figuring out a lot of things. So in the meantime, they could be got at by the teams around them, but you have to feel that there's enough attacking prowess with Coutinho there to push them up the table. And I think that with Coutinho particularly, he does tend to go a little bit missing in the games where it's a real arm wrestle. I don't think he'd do too well at Burnley away in the rain. But if he has players around him like McGinn, who's been in and out of injury, if he has players around him who do the dirty work, then yes, Coutinho could be a player that propels him up the table. But I think he needs players around him to support him in the midfield.
Fair enough. Wolves, they hosted Arsenal. Arsenal won this one 1-0 at the Molineux. Arsenal, they basically, if they win their 2 games in hand, they could be just 2 points behind Chelsea. in fourth, which is wild. I don't think anyone's really been thinking about Arsenal as sort of creeping up the ladder in the same way that maybe that some people have been talking about Spurs and their massive number of games in hand that they've got. But I mean, Spurs aren't winning their games in hand, so it doesn't look like they're going to be climbing up the ladder. Liverpool, finally from match day 24, Liverpool, they hosted Leicester. A brace from Jota helped Liverpool get the 3 points against a battling Leicester, who I'll probably talk about a little bit more about Leicester in a moment. But in terms of Liverpool, obviously a pretty comfortable performance from them. Luis Diaz, the new signing, he made his debut for the club. Looked like he did pretty well. What were your thoughts on his debut, Jesse?
I think he looks great. I think I was considering that I don't think he speaks much English by all accounts, if any. Klopp mentioned that he didn't overload him with information. He just threw him in there, and he looked like and he looked like a player that naturally has a hard work ethic and goes into tackles and presses. And I think that you have to sort of tip your hat to the scouting department in that regard, because they did the same thing with Jota. They saw a player there that was going to fit into the mold very quickly, and there's been this kind of idea that Klopp always takes a while with these players to bed them in, but I think he's getting better at picking the right players early, and now we're not seeing these long bed-in periods with some of these players. I mean, he's just throwing them straight in. So I think Luis Diaz will be very important for us in the next couple of months with all the different competitions that we're still in. But what I will say is it's Colombia, not Colombia, as per the magnet on your fridge, Tommie.
Yeah, great shout out to all of the people that misspell Colombia instead of Colombia. I should have worn my Colombian jersey tonight. I actually looked at it and went, oh,
you're Colombian.
Yeah. All right, that makes us halfway through the Premier League games from this week's football. Next up, Manchester United, they hosted Southampton, which was sort of eerily similar to Manchester United's game against Burnley and Spurs' game against Southampton. Some desperate defending from Southampton early on. 2 big clearances off the line basically kept them in it, but it was Jadon Sancho who opened the scoring in this one. Shea Adams then equalised with the most precise of finishes. Just later on, though, Man United huffed and puffed, but ultimately couldn't blow down Southampton's house. And again, as I said, it felt, I was going to make the comparison before, that it felt like even though Spurs have a whole bunch of games in hand, that their season's kind of unraveling before their eyes. And with Man United, it kind of feels a little bit that way as well. But there's just a lot of teams around that fourth, fifth, sixth place that everyone is dropping points.
What was the term we used a few years ago at the very beginning of MTAG? Is it top 4 is lava?
Yeah.
I think we're seeing that again, aren't we?
I think we are. I've got the note here that I wouldn't be surprised if Man United are playing Europa League or Europa Conference League next season, but I guess you just never know. Like, as we saw with Leicester in the past few years, like a team who might be in an otherwise good position, they can just shit the bed, and you just don't know what's going to be, what sort of performances or what sort of results a team is going to be putting out in the final few weeks. And they're all so inconsistent. West Ham, Man United, Arsenal, Spurs, and I think that's it, that are kind of in the hunt for fourth place.
Well, I mean, Wolves are proving to be a bit of a pain in the ass to everybody around them, and they clearly have their own aspirations, so I wouldn't rule them out yet.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair point, because I don't think there's a lot of people that are considering Wolves, but they're probably the most consistent out of all of those, those teams.
Another team that I gave a scathing preview on a season or two ago, and look at them now. So,
yep. Question here about Southampton. So this is an article that The Athletic published just today, that in 14 of their 24 past games, a Southampton player will end up going down in between the 60th and 70th minute with injury. And then all of the Southampton players will go get one of those energy gel tubes, like a Zupa Duper or a Sacolé. Do you think that is unethical or unsporting, or do you think it's maybe just a coincidence, or is there anything to read into here?
I mean, I had no idea until this was brought up, so it's very interesting. I mean, it is taking the piss. but what can you do? I mean, unless the referee can see through it and go take him off or get him to walk off and then do the treatment on the sideline. I mean, yeah, unless the referee can pick holes in it, I think it's ultimately Southampton's found a little trick, and they're going to continue to use it until someone does something about it.
Seems like it's paying dividends for them because obviously we had they came down they came back from a goal down against Manchester United. They came down from 2 goals down against Spurs to win that game. So they maybe have found a loophole that they can take advantage of. And
I think a few Saints have to go in the confession box and confess their sins after each game.
Oh, very good. Brentford, they hosted Crystal Palace. This one ended up finishing 0-0.
Most forgettable game I've ever. I think just one of the most forgettable games of the season. I mean,
and I think that's probably all we can probably say about this game was that it was completely forgettable. Finished 0-0. Everton, they hosted Leeds though. Really solid result for Everton. They looked like a completely different side in this one. Their first win under new manager Frank Lampard. Goals for Seamus Coleman, Michael Keane, and young Gordon, who plays on I think he plays on the left-hand side of that front three, at least in this game. Anthony Gordon. I've got him here in my notes that I think that the first few games of Frank Lampard's tenure at Everton are really going to set the tone for them for the remainder of the season. And it's a little bit funny because they obviously got a good result here against Leeds, a 3-0 win. But then obviously they got beaten by Newcastle as well. And to be honest, they weren't great in that game either. So it's still very early days for Frank Lampard and Everton. I mean, I mentioned just before about how Norwich, they're sniffing down the likes of Everton's necks. And I still think that Everton they've got some work to do, I think, yet this season.
Just so the listeners know, we don't condone sniffing down anyone's neck. But
that's a weird turn of phrase, isn't it?
You can go to jail for that. But I think Everton has to win all their home games. I think is where you're sort of going with that. I mean, like they clearly get a lift being at home, and between now and the end of the season, that's where they've got to get their points because they haven't been great on the road, Everton, as per that Newcastle game.
I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin was back in this game, and he's obviously a huge return for Everton and for Frank Lampard. But look, if there's one final thing I want to say about this game, it's that Leeds deserve to lose because wearing like bright yellow socks with white shorts and jersey, I thought was disgusting. It looked like all the Leeds players had pissed their pants, honestly.
I mean, Dominic Calvin-Klein must have been absolutely just distraught facing that.
Oh, geez. Watford, they hosted Brighton. Goals for Neil Maupay and Adrian Webster gave Brighton the win here. Really strange way that Watford set up, I thought, in this one. Watford played super deep, gave Brighton so much respect. Brighton had 64 or going on 65% of possession and basically made Brighton look like Manchester City in their domination of possession and field position. I just thought it was a really strange way to approach a game when you're in Watford's position and they have to win games, they have to get results, and maybe they thought they could hold them out and just play on the break or something like that. But it just seemed like a really negative way to approach a game that is kind of winnable even for a team like Watford and the position that they're in and the form that they're in. Norwich, they hosted Manchester City, and this one went pretty much as well as you can imagine. There was no KDB and no Joao Cancelo for City, but that didn't seem to matter as Raheem Sterling helped himself to a hat-trick, and City ended up getting a 4-0 win. Basically BAU for City and Norwich, really. So, yeah. Sterling did miss a penalty. Did end up getting the tap in, but that's one of those ones where, he scored the goal, but anyone who owns Sterling in Fantasy Premier League would be absolutely blowing up because I think you still get like the -5 or whatever it is for missing the penalty. So it kind of negates getting the goal.
Yeah.
Hate to see it. Burnley, they hosted Liverpool. I think this was Sunday night. Fabinho scored the goal, and then I would argue he scored an own goal at the press conference. He took exception to a reporter suggesting Burnley had some chances in this game. And
so I've seen this coming. Okay, so the narrative is that Burnley had all these chances. Well, here's a stat for you.
Here we go.
Liverpool have won 90 offsides this season. The nearest team in the division is Brentford on 49.
Would you say offsides?
Like they've won that many offsides. Like they've caught teams offsides that many times. These
Right.
Burnley chances. Like I felt as a fan that we were conceding a lot of chances, but
Yeah.
I heard a lot of talk afterwards that Burnley had a lot of chances, and I watched a few of them back, and most of them were offside. But everyone's counting them as chances, but they weren't chances because they were offside. But we have this thing now because the referees let the play go all the way through, that we think that they're chances, but they're not because they were offside. So that's what Fabinho was taking exception at. He was just like, "Well, what are you talking about? I mean, are you talking about legitimate chances or feel good chances?" And just to give you a stat, Burnley was caught offside 7 times in that game alone. So, I mean, if anything, they've just, lured the moth towards the flame. And I just think it's really interesting that we've got this narrative now that chances are, anytime the team has a shot. But we're happy to forget offside. So happy to shoot that one in the water for all those listeners.
So the rest of the question, Jesse, was going to be how embarrassing was that behaviour by Fabinho? But I guess you've probably put that one to bed, I'd say.
I mean, I don't generally leap to our defence that much when it comes to our defence, because our defence sometimes can be really leaky. So I genuinely think that we were a little bit hard done by in the press about how many chances we gave up, because I think people conveniently forgot that they were offside.
Look, man, I think there's nothing wrong with defending your defenders and the way they defend, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. So
it's put many grey hairs on my head, that high line. Watching that every week, it's pretty hard to watch, but it seems to be effective for them. So
Newcastle, they hosted Aston Villa, 1-0 win for Newcastle as Trippier got another goal. 2 wins in a row for Newcastle, which is great for them, takes them out of the relegation zone. Is Trippier the signing of the January window, Jesse?
I wasn't, when I first saw this question, I didn't think necessarily that he was, but the more I think about it, as far as the intangible stuff, the uplift that he's given the team and the fans, big goals at big times, I guess you could definitely say that he is. I mean, we're just talking about in the immediacy since the January window, so it hasn't been that long since the window closed. But yeah, I guess you could say he is, because he's lifted the club and got them out of the relegation zone. He is injured now, though, so they're going to have to find something else.
That's a very important point. I mean, maybe it's lucky that they did sign Matt Targett or Dan Burn, because now they've got a left-footed player that they can play on the right. Anyway, we did mention at the top about the A-League game that's going on right now. Western Sydney, they're hosting Melbourne Victory, and Tate Russell has just scored for the Wanderers, giving the Wanderers a 1-0 lead over the Victory. Curiously, if Melbourne Victory lose this game, it'll be their 3rd A-League game they've lost in a row, and it'll be their 5th game that fifth game in a row that they haven't won. So
the Victory's power rankings not looking good.
Exactly. Look, only a few more games before we wrap things up. Spurs, they hosted Wolves. Spurs getting the 2-0 victory here. Sorry, I got the score in the wrong way there. Wolves a 2-0 victory with Raul Jimenez and Leander Dendoncker giving Wolves the 3 points. He's a great stat for you, Jesse. This will be with these 3 consecutive losses for Spurs. It's the first time Conte has lost 3 consecutive league games for the first time in 13 years. Love to see it.
Yeah, he's getting frustrated too, which is a real clear reminder to the Tottenham board that they should have done more.
This is going to end in tears, isn't it? Two more games left. Leicester, they hosted West Ham. Goals for Jared Bowen and Craig Dawson's cancelled out Ricardo Pereira and Yuri Tielemans from the spot to give a share of the points to West Ham and Leicester. I thought this was a really classic Leicester performance with Leicester looking absolutely electric in sort of that third quarter of the game, but then ultimately just couldn't see out the game with West Ham scoring late on via a Craig Dawson header. One of those real classic Craig Dawson goals that you can just imagine Craig Dawson or Soucek scoring, where they just launch themselves through a brick wall of players to score.
Just throwing a limb at it. His shoulder or something, mate. Can we, I just don't feel we talk enough about Jared Bowen on this pod.
I agree.
I think we need to have a quick moment just to acknowledge that the man is on fire. And as far as talismans go, I mean, we've talked over the years about how much everyone loves Pyatt and how much he meant to the team, and how, you could say definitely a weaker squad, he was just like mercurial.
Mm-hmm.
So, happy to leave that as it is, but I mean, at the moment, you've got to say that Bowen's your talisman.
Yeah, like we've been very fortunate. West Ham's been very fortunate over the last sort of 18 months or so that they haven't had one player that's really been sort of carrying the team for any stretch of time. The whole team has been very consistent. Obviously, you had Antonio. He was in a great goal scoring run, but the team was playing well. And at the moment, the team isn't playing particularly well. But Bowen is just he's keeping them in games or winning them games at the moment, whilst the squad isn't necessarily doing that well. So, mate, I think that's a great shout. Got a stat for you that only Salah has got more goal involvements in this season in the Premier League after Bowen. Bowen's got 8 goals and 7 assists, which is a great return for him. And I totally think that West Ham definitely would not be within a sniff of the top 4 if it weren't for Jared Bowen. Mm-hmm. Something else from this match, Yuri Tielemans, he also scored from the penalty spot, but he said that he won't extend his contract at Leicester. So he's likely off from Leicester at the end of this season. Where do you think he'll end up? Do you think he'll go to a big team in England, or off to Spain, Germany, or PSG, or elsewhere?
I'm not so sure he stays in England. At one stage, Liverpool was looking at him. But now there's a lot of links to Bellingham. There's also discussions that maybe they won't even go out and get a midfielder now that they've got a few midfielders back. So I can't really see any other Premier League teams that Tielemans really fits into just at the moment, unless he went to United, but that would be a bit weird. So I think personally he'll probably go to a club overseas. Yeah,
fair enough. I think it's a real shame, because he's a player that I think would do very well at arguably any of the top 6 teams in the Premier League, the big 6 teams. I think he would be able to hold down his starting place at pretty much any of the top 6 teams, even arguably City. I think with Gundogan not getting any younger, I think Tielemans could definitely step into that City midfield. I would not be surprised at all if he did end up at Liverpool. I think Arsenal could do with him. I think there would be there would be lots of teams, I should say, lots of teams throughout Europe that I think will be very keen to sign Tielemans. It's just he can pretty much have his pick of where he wants to go.
He's got to be careful how he conducts himself in the next few months, though, because his attitude's been a bit off recently, and you can't necessarily blame him entirely for that, because Leicester's been an absolute mess. But I don't think he needs to be careful how he conducts himself if he's going to, doesn't want to be an Aubameyang.
Fair point. Don't want to get on the nangs. Finally, Manchester United, they hosted Brighton. This game was this morning. Rematch of one of the most memorable / infamous games in recent years. That talking about that Brighton, the game where Brighton hit the post about a dozen times, and then Bruno ended up winning the game for Manchester United after the final whistle with that VAR awarded penalty. But look, it was a game that Manchester United seemed to do pretty easily in the end. Ronaldo opened the scoring, and then the game was made somewhat easier for Manchester United as Lewis Dunk was sent off for denying Elanga an obvious goal-scoring opportunity. I got to say, mate. Bruno ended up finishing the route very late in injury time to make it 2-0. But look, I've got to say, I don't think that Lewis Dunk red card should have been red. I thought that the referee got it right the first time around. I don't know if you've seen it, Jesse, and fair play if you haven't. But
I have.
VAR ended up bringing it back, and the referee went over and had a look at the video. But and I can see, it's obviously a foul. But to give that as a red card when I think it was. Not Dunk. Who's the other one? Duffy. I think it was Duffy that was stepping.
Webster. I think it was Webster.
Yeah. Webster was stepping across and looked like he was half a step away from at least making a tackle. And so I thought it was very, very harsh on Lewis Dunk to be a red card.
I mean, it's like I said in the group chat earlier. I mean, I think we all know that Elanga was going to regain the ball, nutmeg Webster, and then chip it top ends. That was obviously going to happen, 100%. No, I do think that. I do think that. I mean, it also shows the ugly side of the game. I mean, Bruno, Ronaldo. I mean, both players that I love for Portugal are just they're just straight at the ref, trying to get the guy sent off, and it was just a lot of players with that agenda of let's get him sent off, and then obviously VAR got involved, but it's a really tricky one with there must be something about Old Trafford in the camera views, because remember there was that big debate about the West Ham offside in the last minute when United scored, and it was from a similar angle. And if you look at one angle, and it looks like Webster's really close. And then you look at another angle and the ball kind of spills and then Webster gets it after a little bit of a delay. So then you look at that and you think, well, would Webster have got to it? So it's kind of ironically, the referee probably had the best position on the pitch because he can see it from the other end and he's looking back towards the goal and he could see the meterage and how close it actually was. I feel like the cameras, it was difficult to, depending on which angle you're looking at, it was difficult to ascertain how close he actually was. But at first glance, personally, I didn't know why they were surrounding the ref. I thought it was a yellow card. And then, obviously they decided he was definitely going to score, which I don't think any of us can really say he was definitely going to score.
I think
that's not the rule. It's not the rule, I guess.
There was one other incident. I can't remember when it was. Might have been in the A-League where there was just a terrible camera angle. And if you go to VAR and VAR has only got terrible camera angles to look at, then how is the VAR meant to make an educated decision on possibly a howler of a call? So interesting one there. But obviously, Manchester United, they still got the 3 points. Brighton not creating a hell of a lot of chances there, unfortunately. But obviously, they played the game or a third of the game with only 10 men. Finally, this week it's time to give away a More Than a Game FPL prize. January, a bit of a strange month in FPL, not many games, and the lowest monthly total or prize winning total since October. And that was a month that had an international break smack bang in the middle of the month. This month's winner is, drumroll, is Tim Davidson, whose team Brownwell Tempelli 11 got 242 points. So congratulations, Tim, and well played this month.
Nice.
Make sure you get in touch with us, Tim, and let us know how we can get you this month's prize to you. Overall, our August monthly winner from last year, at the beginning of this season, Danny Demolski, his team Saka Punch out in front, just 28 points ahead of Jake Marsden. It's very tight at the top of MTAG FPL, so good luck all of the players out there, and hopefully the game is friendly to you. Normally, I should say it's remiss of me that I don't have an update for how all of the More Than a Game hosts are doing. And look, the conspiracy theorists out there will say that that's just because I'm not going very well this season, and that because Colby and I are neck and neck. That's partially true, but I've just forgotten.
I don't want to throw shade at this stage, but I am an 8th. Although I mean, I don't know if that's the same as the table you're looking at, but according to mine, I'm an 8th. So I'm up there with the nosebleeds, but I mean, I scroll down and it cuts off at 50. I can't find you guys. So
Brutal.
I genuinely don't know where you and Colby are at the moment, but
So
you must
I'm
be
53rd. I'm 53rd, so you're right.
That's cruel. You're very close. You're very close to top 50.
So this
just shows you how many people is in this league. It's a very competitive league.
So Jesse, you note that Anthony Eade, he's he's practically top of the table at the moment, but to win a prize, you have to have paid the entry fee for MTAG FPL. So hence Danny Domowski is sitting second, but he's the highest paid up participant.
Nice.
So you'd be sitting, I think you'd be sitting about fourth, maybe fifth in terms of all the paid up members. But you're right,
Wow.
you're sitting eighth at the moment overall. There's a bunch of people that are still in there from last year's league. So I think next year I'll actually just start a brand new league so that we don't have the same problem again next year. But look, still plenty of FPL to come. I think we're only into game week 24, I think. 25. So 25. So still there's what's that? 13 rounds to go. And then there's still the FA Cup games to come. Still plenty of games in hand. So still plenty of double game weeks in the mix as well to keep things interesting. But look, that wraps things up for this week. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. It's been great catching up with Jesse, and it's been great having all the feedback from all the listeners as well. We'll be back next week with plenty more A-League and Premier League once again, as always. But until then, enjoy the football.